A single gunshot on a Tuesday afternoon. An event that drew a clear, dark line in modern political history. There was before, and there was after. But as the world was trying to process what just happened, a second story began to take shape. Not on the streets, but online. This story was woven from anonymous accounts, grainy photos, and whispers of a massive cover-up. This isn't just the story of an assassination. It's the story of the stories. On September 10th, 2025, the political world was rocked by the fatal shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. It happened in broad daylight while he was speaking at Utah Valley University, the very first stop on his American comeback tour. Shocking videos of the attack spread across social media with terrifying speed, exposing millions to the brutal reality of the moment. In the immediate aftermath, law enforcement launched a massive manhunt for the suspect. But in that vacuum of information, something else erupted. The public's desperate search for answers in a deeply polarized country created the perfect storm for speculation, misinformation, and conspiracy to take over. Now, this video isn't trying to solve the crime. The FBI and local authorities have their suspect and are pursuing a specific line of inquiry. What we're doing today is taking a hard look at the most viral theories that grew out of that digital fog. We're going to break down the major conspiracies, from alleged government plots to bizarre hoaxes and identity misinformation. The goal isn't to find the final truth, but to understand how these narratives are born, why they spread so fast, and what they reveal about the fragile state of our shared reality. Today, we're mapping out the architecture of modern conspiracy. Before we can dive into the web of conspiracies, we have to establish the official version of events, the one pieced together by law enforcement and reported by major news outlets. Understanding this baseline is the only way to see where the other narratives twist and break away from reality. On the afternoon of September 10th, 2025, Charlie Kirk was on stage at an outdoor event on the campus of Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. He was talking with an audience member about mass shootings and transgender issues when a single shot rang out. Kirk was hit in the neck and was pronounced dead at a local hospital. The shot came from a distance, estimated at about 142 yards, from the roof of a nearby building. The scene was pure chaos, but authorities quickly figured out it was a targeted attack, and Kirk was the only victim. This kicked off a massive 33-hour manhunt for the shooter. For nearly 2 days, the public had almost no official information besides a grainy photo of a person of interest that the FBI released. That critical 2-day delay became a breeding ground for wild speculation. Finally, on September 12th, authorities announced the arrest of 22-year-old Tyler James Robinson of Washington, Utah. Robinson, who wasn't a student there, was taken into custody after his family members and a friend tipped off the police. His own father reportedly helped convince him to surrender. According to the inmate booking sheet, he was arrested on suspicion of aggravated murder, obstruction of justice, and felony discharge of a firearm. The evidence linking Robinson to the crime, as laid out by officials, was mostly forensic. The FBI director stated that Robinson's DNA was found on a towel wrapped around the murder weapon, a .30 meters Sorzix Mauser M98 bolt-action rifle. His DNA was also on a screwdriver found on the rooftop where the shot was fired. So what about the motive? That became the next big question. According to Utah Governor Spencer Cox, Robinson hasn't been very cooperative with investigators, but interviews with his family and friends started to paint a picture. His family, described as staunchly Republican, told investigators that Robinson held very different political views and had a personal hatred for Charlie Kirk. They said he'd become much more political in recent years, and one family member remembered a dinner conversation where Robinson went off about Kirk's viewpoints and mentioned his upcoming visit to the university. Governor Cox described Robinson's ideology as leftist, suggesting he had been deeply indoctrinated and radicalized online while spending a lot of time in the dark corners of the internet, like Reddit and other forums. This seemed to be backed up by inscriptions found engraved on shell casings at the scene. One fired casing reportedly read, "Notices, bulges OWO what's this?" a phrase straight out of internet meme culture. 3 unfired casings also had messages, including the chilling phrase, "Hey fascist." More evidence of premeditation came from a destroyed note. The FBI director reported that while the note itself was torn up, forensic evidence of it was recovered. He summarized its contents, saying the suspect wrote that he had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and was going to take it. Text messages also revealed Robinson's desire to take out Kirk. Investigators believe Robinson acted alone as the shooter, but they're still digging into his activities before and after the attack. So that's the official story. A lone politically radicalized young man, fueled by online propaganda and a personal vendetta, who meticulously planned and carried out a political assassination. It's a straightforward if terrifying narrative, but on the internet, straightforward narratives rarely stay that way for long. The conspiracy breakdown. That 33-hour gap between the shooting and the arrest wasn't empty. It was a chaotic incubator for theories. Millions of people, desperate for an explanation, turned to social media, and in that void, a tangled mess of misinformation, disinformation, and outright lies started to grow. Let's look at the biggest theories that went viral. Theory 1. The government false flag operation. One of the first and stickiest conspiracies to pop up was the idea that Charlie Kirk's assassination was a false flag operation run by the US government itself. This theory, which is popular in some right-wing and anti-government circles, says the official story is just a cover for something much more sinister. This theory doesn't have one single motive, but a whole menu of possibilities. Some say the goal was to silence a loud and effective critic of the administration. Others claim the assassination was meant to be a catalyst, an event so shocking it would justify new laws restricting speech, gun ownership, or public gatherings, all aimed at conservatives. An even more extreme version argues it was meant to provoke a violent reaction from the right, which could then be used as an excuse for a wider political crackdown. The evidence here is almost all circumstantial, based on interpreting events with suspicion, rather than pointing to actual proof. Online sleuths pointed to the 2-day delay in catching the suspect as proof that the story was being fabricated behind the scenes. A key piece of evidence they latched onto was the note mentioned by the FBI. An early unconfirmed report claimed the note mentioned a doppelganger. That single word was seized as proof that the operation used lookalikes, or that Robinson himself was a brainwashed patsy. Even after the FBI clarified the note's real contents, a simple statement of intent to kill Kirk, the doppelganger myth lived on in the darker corners of the internet. Another focal point was the initial confusion on the ground. Right after the shooting, another man, George Sin, was seen on camera being put in handcuffs. He was later released and only charged with obstruction, with police saying he had nothing to do with the shooting itself. But to conspiracy theorists, this wasn't just police detaining someone in a chaotic scene. It was proof of a second shooter, a decoy, or a botched attempt to frame someone else before they settled on Robinson. Official investigations have found zero credible evidence that any government agency was involved. The FBI's case is built on physical evidence, like DNA and digital evidence from Robinson's own phone and computer. The false flag narrative remains a story built on suspicion and a deep distrust of institutions, not on any verifiable facts from the case. It works by reinterpreting every official fact through a lens of paranoia. Theory 2. The storm of identity misinformation. But maybe the most chaotic and immediately harmful part of this whole mess was the whirlwind of identity misinformation that flooded social media. With no official suspect, the internet mob appointed itself judge, jury, and executioner, and innocent people paid the price. The first wave was pure political finger-pointing. Before Robinson was identified, doctored photos and false claims flew. Some accounts claimed the shooter was wearing pro-Trump gear, while others insisted he was a registered Republican, trying to frame it as right-wing infighting. At the same time, other groups claimed he was a card-carrying member of the Democratic Socialists of America. Voter records later showed all of this was wrong. Robinson was an unaffiliated voter. It highlights a grim truth. For many, the first instinct isn't to find the truth, but to blame the other side. The second, and much more vicious, wave of misinformation was about the shooter's gender identity. Because Kirk was answering a question about transgender issues when he was shot, right-wing commentators and online trolls immediately started pushing the idea that the killer must be transgender. This theory had no basis in fact, but it took on a life of its own and quickly turned into a targeted harassment campaign. A musician named Sky Velades, who is a transgender woman, was one of the first victims. Her picture was stolen and passed around online, falsely identifying her as the shooter. Another woman, named Michaela from Seattle, was also wrongly accused with doctored images. Both of them, with zero connection to the event, were hit with a flood of online hate and threats, forcing the FBI to step in to protect them. This narrative got even more complicated later. After Robinson's arrest, Governor Spencer Cox confirmed that the suspect's roommate, who he was in a romantic relationship with, was a transgender person. For those who had pushed the transgender shooter theory, this felt like a victory, even though the shooter himself wasn't transgender. They argued the roommate's identity was the real motive, a claim authorities haven't backed up. In reality, the roommate has been described as incredibly cooperative with law enforcement and had no idea what Robinson was planning. A third wave of misinformation involved just making up a suspect from scratch. A 77-year-old retired banker from Toronto, named Michael Mallinson, suddenly saw his photo spreading online, with accounts, including an AI chatbot, claiming he was the shooter. Mallinson, who told reporters he'd never even been to Utah, had to delete his social media and calm down panicked family and friends. He said the experience felt like being violated, and pouring gasoline on this entire fire were AI tools. Chatbots like Grok and Perplexity gave confident, but completely wrong, answers. Some bots claimed Kirk wasn't even dead, calling the video a meme edit. X's AI chatbot, Grok, wrongly named Michael Mallinson as the suspect, even falsely citing CNN and the New York Times as sources. Other AI tools enhanced the grainy FBI photo, creating distorted faces that led to even more false accusations. This exposed a dangerous new frontier, where automated systems can amplify and legitimize lies at a terrifying scale and speed. Theory 3. Foreknowledge and the online ecosystem. While many conspiracies were spun up after the shooting, There's a thread that's much more disturbing: the possibility that some people knew about the attack before it happened. The FBI confirmed it was investigating social media accounts that posted messages about Kirk's assassination before it happened. This suggests that Tyler Robinson might not have been a total lone wolf, but part of a wider online ecosystem where this kind of violence was discussed and encouraged. Investigators are looking into a radical online subculture that may have influenced Robinson. One of the accounts that posted a warning beforehand was found to be following Robinson's roommate, suggesting a possible, if indirect, link. These weren't just idle threats. They were specific enough to get the attention of federal law enforcement, who are now trying to figure out if anyone else could be charged with conspiracy. This was made even murkier by deliberate fakes. A phony social media post that seemed to predict the shooting a day early went viral. It turned out the post was likely backdated or edited to create the illusion of foreknowledge, a tactic designed specifically to fuel conspiracy theories. Robinson's own digital footprint gives us more clues. Right before his arrest, an account believed to be his reportedly posted a message to a small group of online friends on Discord, which allegedly read, "Hey guys, I have bad news for you all. It was me at UVU yesterday. I'm sorry for all of this." He also apparently thanked the group for the good times and said he'd be surrendering soon. This confession suggests he was part of an online community, which begs the question, what else did he share with them before the attack? The engravings on the bullet casings also point to someone deep inside a specific terminally online culture. "Hey fascist, catch," is direct. But another inscription, a series of arrows, was thought to be a reference to the button sequence used to call in an airstrike in the video game Helldivers 2. This blend of political hate with video game and meme culture is a hallmark of those dark online spaces Governor Cox mentioned, where real-world violence gets treated like a game. Unlike the government false flag theory, this area has verifiable truth to it. The FBI is investigating foreknowledge. The suspect was deep in a specific online culture, but the line between a loose group of online extremists and an organized plot is blurry. This theory is scary because it suggests the lone wolf narrative might be too simple. It hints at a wider network of radicalization, a digital swamp that breeds violence, even if it doesn't directly command it. The horror here isn't that a government agency was behind this, but that a decentralized online culture of hate might have been just as deadly. If you zoom out from all the specific theories, you start to see a blueprint for how chaos works in the 21st century. The aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination is a masterclass in how misinformation spreads. It's a story about technology, psychology, and a political climate at its breaking point. The first and most critical ingredient was the information vacuum. For 33 hours, the official story was "we're looking," and human nature hates a vacuum. When we don't have facts, we fill the void with speculation. That's not new. But the speed and scale of social media have turned that tendency into an engine of chaos. Platforms built for instant reaction are the worst possible place to be during the slow, careful process of a criminal investigation. This was then exploited by all sorts of people. Foreign adversaries, including bots from Russia and China, were caught spreading disinformation to stir up conflict and encourage violence. Utah's governor even had to warn the public about these campaigns, which are designed to polarize us and destroy trust in our institutions. Alongside them were domestic political opportunists. Commentators on both sides immediately used the tragedy to score points, pushing any claim that fit their narrative, whether it was true or not. The false claims about the shooter's voter registration are a perfect example of this knee-jerk tribal blame game, and the whole thing was supercharged by technology that has gotten way ahead of our ability to manage it. AI chatbots confidently passed off fabrications as fact, creating a false sense of authority that misled millions. The flood of doctored and AI-enhanced images meant you couldn't even trust your own eyes. The very tools that promised to organize the world's information were used to pollute it during a crisis. The consequences weren't just digital, they spilled into the real world, fast. Innocent people, like Michael Mollinson, Sky Villedas, and Michaela, were publicly dragged through the mud, their lives turned upside down by a viral lie. The fallout also hit the workplace. In a bizarre and ugly turn, a wave of cancel culture erupted as conservative activists led campaigns to get people fired for celebrating or making crude jokes about Kirk's death. A website was even set up to dox people who celebrated the shooting. At least 15 people, from political analysts to airline employees and even a Secret Service agent, were fired, suspended, or investigated for what they posted online. This sparked a fierce debate about free speech versus consequences, showing how online anger can have very real, life-altering effects. What this all reveals is a deeply broken information ecosystem. We're living in a post-truth world, where the very foundation of a shared reality is cracking. The assassination was a single act of violence, but the reaction to it was a mass demonstration of just how vulnerable we are. It showed how easily we can be manipulated, how quickly we retreat into our political tribes, and how our own technology can be turned against us. So you have the official narrative of a targeted political assassination, and then you have the shadow stories that grew around it. The specter of a government false flag, the vicious storm of misinformation that hurt innocent people, and the unsettling evidence of a radical online ecosystem. Each theory is like a mirror, reflecting our own anxieties, distrust in government, fear of the other, and the creepy influence of the internet's darkest corners. The assassination of Charlie Kirk shows us that in a crisis, we're not just battling for facts, we're battling against powerful narratives. These stories are fed by our own biases, amplified by algorithms, and weaponized by people who want to tear us apart. The official story, based on forensic evidence, points to one radicalized person. The conspiracies, however, tell a story of a world where nothing is as it seems, and where truth is just a matter of opinion. This video was never about finding the real killer. It was about looking at the stories we tell ourselves. When the unthinkable happens, the definitive truth of what happened that day might be settled in a courtroom. But the bigger questions this whole mess raises are going to be with us for a long time. In an age of deep fakes, AI-generated lies, and rampant misinformation, our sense of a shared reality is more fragile than ever. The question is no longer just what happened. The question is, what can we even trust? Which of these theories have you seen spreading? And what does it say about us that these stories can sometimes feel more powerful than the facts themselves? Let me know your thoughts on the nature of online conspiracies in the comments below.